let's go.
All right. We're going to get this kicked off. It's been a while. I wrangled up my ship-talking amigo, Curtis Garrett, from the other side of the country. We're going to kick this show off. There's been lots of chaos in the industry, if you will, not around capacity going through the roof, but lots of changes happening between eBOL of lading, right? New APIs within MFTA, and then our lovely class change or density table change, whatever you want to call it, you know, the big swath of 2,000 items that rolled out here July 19th, which was a Saturday. So Monday morning, everybody came in and it was real. And then we caught an announcement. I don't think a lot of people even knew about it. They found out about it when they were like scrolling through LinkedIn on Saturday or Sunday, catching up, that FedEx was like, hold the phone. We are going to give our shippers a stay of execution, you know, through the end of the year with these changes. We'll still recognize a sub 13, but we're going to operate on a sub 11 and not punish them, which was weird, especially for platforms like me, right? Where if the entire industry moved to sub 13, I now have a unicorn out there that's kind of not playing by the neutrality of how I would like the platform to work. But right. It is what it is. What are your thoughts on that, Curtis?
Yeah, that was interesting. Smart, I think. I mean, so I think of a few things. First, I was talking with Mike Campese about it from DDC. Mm-hmm. He said it would be great if, you know, within this extended period, they start capturing what these changes and reclassifications would be, but, you know, basically report and hand that back to their customers as kind of like mm-hmm. some additional learning curve. So I don't know for sure if that is happening. That would be smart, I think, of FedEx to do.
Yeah.
Obviously the timing, the announcement, you know, like this industry is notorious for not too many carriers want to step out and be the first to do something or be the highest or the lowest. You know, they love kind of staying in the pack, so to say. And I'm a bit surprised that no other carrier has followed up with any sort of version on that. Like maybe not to the, you know, to completely echo it, but just a bit of a PR strategy, like, hey, we'll work with you, customers. Like we're not going to bring our biggest baseball bats to the party come Monday. There's obviously, and on a past episode, you and I talked about just the whole FedEx spinoff and mm-hmm. who might be looking to buy them or what that new FedEx Freight standalone entity looks like in the coming years. So they're hiring, they're spending a lot of money in hiring a lot of freight specific salespeople. They're getting a lot of really good quality people from what I've seen and folks that I know that are coming there from other carriers, other companies. Mm-hmm. So yeah, it's I think it gives them an advantage in a softer market to say, hey, we are currently the most flexible option in the market right now, especially from the large national carrier corner, to again, not just come out, you know, blunt force objects, cram these reclasses down your throat. It's a bit of a, let's kind of ease into this together. They sit back, you know, because they are the unicorn in this situation. Most shippers that are already prepared or have been preparing over the past year, or very quickly when they start seeing these adjusted invoices and start experiencing some real pain in the next like 60 days from, you know, invoice corrections, they're going to change quickly. And so they get to enjoy a bit of a luxury of letting that kind of that dust settle a little bit and that hard work, you know, get done by competitors of theirs. And then lastly, it just gives them more time from a pricing team perspective to engage with customers and figure out, okay, if we do need to make any changes to your discounts, minimums, FAKs, your pricing structure in general, you know, let's work through that together before the hammer drops.
Yeah. So I have a little bit of a different perspective on this, which is great, right?
That's what I hear
here. Yeah. And I see this more from, I get the privilege, I'll call it a privilege, of being on the road an awful lot. My family might not be is a privilege, but I'm out there. I'm riding along. I'm interacting with a ton of shippers, through our partner carrier network, visiting them. And I also see it just in the way that we roll out other products and have to work with shippers that use FedEx. Is currently the way FedEx is set up is not like other LTL carriers where they have about 225 dedicated, SMB reps in the field, whether you want to call them account executive or, territory managers. They're all field LTL reps in the field. FedEx doesn't have the same presence as Old Dominion, Saia, or Estes because it's not decoupled yet, and they do have a focus on parcel and LTL. And a lot of shippers don't get a lot of interaction with their rep or even know who they are. So to go out there and roll this change out, I think they've pushed this out under the guise that we've done this for our shipper. But when I really lift the veil, I think they're the biggest winner of the administrative cost burden and the chaos that would have ensued internally, while their core focus is decoupling, staffing up for this change. That would have thrown a wrench in their gear that administratively, I think, would have strapped them from what their ultimate objective is in like June 1st of 2026. I think they made the announcement. That's what they're targeting. Yeah. Right. So I think this was more beneficial internally to FedEx to focus on their core objective and minimize internal thrash, right, in a softer market. I totally agree with you that to some extent, it will benefit the shippers that don't want to change, especially a lot of folks that I see use FedEx parcel and LTL very heavily and not a lot of other carriers. So I can see it from that angle, but I really see it from that internal, like we don't have the bandwidth to deal with the pin on this grenade coming out and blowing up right now. So let's lengthen out the ramp so that the bell curve isn't as steep for us or our customers to get through this with the core focus on decoupling and becoming an LTL carrier, right? Because they pick up double the volume and have double the shipments, thereby double the problems any other carrier would have.
Yeah,
and that shouldn't happen, right?
That's a great point. And back to where I mentioned, all these new LTL freight focused salespeople coming on board. There's a lot of reconfiguration within the FedEx sales org right now. So you're absolutely right. If whether it's the last key conversation that an account manager has before they wave Sayonara and say, hey, I'm staying with the parcel side, the mothership, or whether it's the first conversation that, a new incoming freight specific sales and account manager has, this is a big sensitive topic and you don't want it to be the last conversation or the first with somebody new. So yeah, great point.
So what have you seen with some of these MFP? What's that?
Just speaking of travel and how you phrase it as luxury, I think we should all acknowledge here for a second Keith Peterson at the NMFTA. I think he deserves the Industry Road Warrior Award for the past year of being out there at every conference, doing webinars, I'm sure from the hotel rooms in the road. And he's been, spreading the word.
He's been in office in his travels. Like I've crossed streams about every event. I've seen him somewhere. Right. Yeah. So I'm with you there. He's been hot and heavy out there. And I don't think a lot of shippers realize that this was just the first swath. And they're not stopping at the 2,000 items. They're stopping there because they only had so much time within a given year to categorize and look for that stuff. So my thought is, in talking and interacting with them is in 26, there'll be another swath of these where they have more time to really go through the catalog and put like products together and strip away some of the ambiguity, right, out of how you reference and look for things. And we've talked about this. A lot of the categorization is under like first principle thinking. Like I was at a shipper who was impacted by changes and he's shipping cardboard, right? Corrugated cardboard for like Kellogg's and other people that, printed matter, like the actual boxes on the store shelf that we go by, right? And like, I'm thinking it's just cardboard, KD, knocked down, right? But the way you got to look for it, I think it was corrugated printed material. Just things I would never think of in referencing the product. So it makes it even hard for people to use class it the way it's constructed today. And I think AI can help translate that stuff. And we're looking at using AI in other ways to dumb this down and make it even easier for shippers to categorize, catalog, and get the right items in there.
Yeah.
So just some stuff I see with that, but I'm with you there. Yeah, Keith has been on the road a lot.
Yeah, no, I agree. There's a lot of work to be done still, and this was a giant step forward. We've all seen a bit of the miscommunication out there where folks are already waving the density based pricing flag, and class is gone by the wayside, and that's just not the case.
Yeah.
You still need to plug in a class obviously to get a rate, and there's still a lot of, as you mentioned, that old school legacy verbiage. Another good example is like if you're looking for a frisbee, it's I believe it's under flying disc or something to that nature, where it very
Yeah.
first principles, it does truly describe what it is, but it's kind of in the vein of like what your high school science teacher might define something
Yeah.
as. So a lot of the categorizations, definitions, the knockdown, the setup, now there's stuff in there that I think will remain. I hope it does, because it is valuable. Like if you have a piece of machinery on a pallet, unprotected largely, maybe it's banded to a pallet versus completely enclosed in a secure wooden crate, those in my mind should be subject to a different class, because there's definitely a different risk profile from a carrier and a claim standpoint.
Mm-hmm. No, you're absolutely right there. And I've also seen with this change, I've seen it be a catalyst for more people adopting density style pricing, right? That's really based off the cube and pounds per cubic foot. Especially customers that are like your nested commodity shippers, where in the past you would typically have, 2 and 3 tier FAKs because you have all these different items at different classes. I've seen it, play out well for them. And then like when we did our internal analysis, like a lot of the national accounts or larger shippers already had an FAK structure in place. And with the sliding class changes, and PCF bumping something from what was maybe class 100 before, now is 125 because of a 0.2 change in PCF of the exact same package, right? Those FAK structures have still protected a lot of these larger shippers to where they won't be impacted as much as what I think the SMB market is going to be impacted, because their pricing tariffs and agreements aren't the same as people with buying power or larger spend. You know what I mean?
Right. Yeah. And that there, the different tiers, I mean, that's an important, thing to focus on, and future initiative is kind of softening and flattening the cliffs between these different tiers, whether it's, moving from a 13 to from an 11 sub, that jump from 125 to 175, that's a big difference when it comes to the price of a shipment.
Yep.
And like you said, just coming down to a minute difference in the the density of the shipment itself. So that we can spread. I think we've talked in the past about rules tariffs when you're looking at overlength tiers, when you're looking at all sorts of different items where, hey, it doesn't qualify here anymore. You now qualify for the next tier, whether that's class, overlengths, space occupied in any given application of any rule. Just flattening those transitions, I think, is wise from a industry, standardized perspective, like the NMFTA overseas, or carrier by carrier.
Yeah.
It's the jolts of, hey, this was an inch longer than I thought, and now I'm paying $600
Yeah.
more. That's what hurts.
Yeah. I'd tell you what I would love to see standardized, and we've talked about this before, is rules tariffs.
Right.
My goodness, man. I would love if
Separate
the
and then
yeah, you
standardize.
just get a standard rules tariff. And this is how I look at rules tariffs. I feel like they've never ever lost weight. They've only, when there's been an industry change or something where the carriers are like, we got to make a change, we just add to it and layer the cake. So I think like rules tariffs one could use a healthy rejuvenization and like rationalization of what we're doing. And is there things we've added to this thing 5 and 10 years ago that aren't even really applicable in today's environment, but they live back there and they're arbitrarily used at certain times, but not all the time? Like, talk about creating massive customer confusion and an overall bad experience. And I get why they exist too, right?
Totally.
But like so many of the rules in the tariff can't even be rated or assigned over an API and don't even rate on the carrier's website, but they're rules that live in the background that are
Right.
like, well, we'll add a little revenue to this. You couldn't rate for it. You couldn't account for it. We couldn't tell you about it, but they're rules.
Yeah.
Sorry.
That's probably the key metric there is like, understandably, the world gets more complex. That translates into the LTL world, that all the different variations of locations and freight types and configurations. Like,
Yeah.
yeah, things are getting more complex. They're changing and evolving. But if your rules tariff is growing faster than your, auto rating percentage, then you have
Yeah.
you need to be able to define and automate and keep pulling those back end rules into the front quoting experience. Uh,
Mm-hmm.
Otherwise, this whole just cottage industry of rebills and collections and kind of that pain that we all experience in the LTL world is going to remain.
Yeah. Nope, I'm with you there. What are you seeing in your rate hero endeavors? Because you've got a mix. You're diversified, working with 3PLs and also some direct shippers out there. What are you kind of seeing from this landscape? Is there anything you're seeing in either one of those realms, the 3PL realm or the direct shipper realm, as they try to mitigate or navigate some of these changes?
I would say in general, 3PLs have been a lot more proactive to it. Just at, where they fall in the equation, their shipper customers look to them for the expertise and to reduce their friction when it comes to LTL. So
Mhm.
they're ultimately accountable for whatever comes downstream from the carriers, and arguably they feel more pain. If you surveyed 1,000 3PLs or brokerages that handle LTL, and you asked each one how much they give and how much they like absorb, when
Mhm.
there's large changes and second invoices and things like that, I think it would be a shockingly high number where they're all kind of invested in buying into that smoother, LTL shipper experience for their customers. So yeah, we probably work with, 80% in the 3PL space and just 20 in the direct shipper space.
Mhm.
But there's a noted just behavior divergence there where 3PLs, I mean, they're obviously in the weeds more, and they should be more knowledgeable on the ins and outs of the LTL world.
Yeah.
And so the good ones are definitely lending themselves to being more proactive and getting ahead of the changes. But in general, we're getting a lot of interest and inbound, just questions on, hey, we want to jump in with both feet to the LTL world. How can we do it better? And a lot of that starts, at the pricing and the carrier relations
Mhm.
from those aspects. So yeah, we're seeing a ton of interest in general. I think a lot of 3PLs are seeing anytime there's a big change or there's any sort of chaotic chaos and dust kicked up in an industry, in a way like that lowers the bar to entry, and you're going to
Mhm.
have even the legacy leaders in the bigger companies, are going to be, they're going to have some dust in their eyes. They're going to be looking for the trail, and that provides an opportunity for someone that's smaller and leaner, more nimble to catch up a little bit, and steal some
Mhm.
market share.
Yeah, I'm seeing. Are you seeing any of your 3PL folks that you work with starting to like require or input dimensional fields within their workflows to try to capture some of this information better? As you kind of noted, when some of these big swath changes come through and affect everybody, in some cases 3PL should be more savvy to the change, but there's also something that'll happen with either margin compression or being smart enough to adjust your flows to keep your margins where they're at while not getting in trouble on rebills, variances, because the customers may not be entering that stuff accordingly. Maybe in the past you had more protection with the way that your pricing was structured with the LTL carrier, but now with these changes coming in, some of the relationships and dynamics are changing, right?
Absolutely. Yeah, you're 100% right. Every 3PL that we work with, of course, we advise, that they need to be pushing their shippers to be entering dimensions on every single shipment that enters their TMS. I would say probably 90% of the bids that we help our clients manage right now are actual class, no FAKs. And that's just so not only is it so important and better for the carrier involved as well, but it's really better for the shipper because you remove that ambiguity and that guessing and ultimately the risk from a carrier's perspective of, hey, okay, I see your shipment data as presented today. I'm going to pull that in my cost model and see, the variations of all the different classes represented in the shipper's profile. But I'm ultimately gambling on what I agree to reduce this mix of classes down to a lower rated class. So I think a lot of shippers just purely see it as an even trade and just saying, hey, you let me group 3 or 4 of them together. I'll be more accurate on the classes I'm giving you because I don't have to go, spend as much time researching and potentially have user error when I'm trying to figure out the right NMFC in class. But it's not an even trade. It's a convenience factor for the shipper. The carrier gets nothing. They're giving up something. And so obviously, like any smart business, they're going to build in a little bit of extra margin to account for any future class mix change.
You're going to hedge on the higher side of the PCF, not the lower side of it when you build these FAKs. And I tell shippers that. And on one aspect of it, I understand through looking at that myopic view of the shipper where you visualize this is easier. But sometimes it's easier because of the workflows or tools you're using today are not optimal to go to that other environment at actual class or density base because you're not wanting to give the concessions on measuring every pallet you have. You don't want to do that. So you give up the concession there, but I don't think you fully understand what you're risking over there too. Right. And it's a hard thing for them to really go through an ROI with inadequate tools. And there's an art to ROIing this stuff. And it's a lot harder, I think, when you really have to do the math on the other side of the fence versus an FAK. I did this at another company, or this is the way the industry rolls. This is what's best for us for simplicity, right? There's a convenience factor in an FAK, but just like a convenience store, milk and eggs cost more at Circle K than they do at the grocery store because of convenience.
That's right.
So I do think there's
something there. Nowhere. Yeah. Their price might be $1 higher per gallon. And the easy answer is, which didn't used to be an easy answer even just 2 or 3 years ago, but go get a dimensioner. Like there's enough competition in
more players coming into the game at a cheaper price point, and you can go out there and get the creme de la cremes, right? Just like I can a car and go buy a Lexus or go buy a Toyota Corolla.
Right.
They're both going to get me to the same place. But depending on what you want to use and how nice you want it to be and what you want out of it, it's going to be a little different.
Yeah. Yeah, it's a huge step in a shipper kind of owning that portion of their LTL freight workflow. And in a way, like the carriers, by beefing up and investing in scales and dimensioners and just being able to quantify the freight they're picking up and putting on their trailers, they've gotten way ahead. Like they have all the ammo essentially. And shippers who are just eyeballing or guessing or even just taking ERP, carton level weights and adding them up, like that's not good enough anymore. That doesn't cut it anymore. And so a shipper that buys a dimensioner, which again, they're not that expensive anymore. You don't have to drop $200,000 on a dimensioner. You get one of them for each warehouse. Ball's back in the carrier's court, in my view, where they're like, for years now, been saying, shippers, get accurate on your dimensions. Give us dimensions in the first place. Shipper now says, okay, I bought the tool. It's been calibrated. Come check it out. Tour my facility. Look at all the ways that I've invested in being a good partner and being a prime shipper for you. And so when the carrier's like, hey, we trust our dimensions over yours, and we're still going to send you that reclass, it kind of evens the playing field. And that is now going to push carriers to kind of reevaluate their W&I policies and strategies to say, okay, 20% of our customers now have verified, INTEP certified dimensioning units. The old strategy of just saying we're right, you're wrong is not going to cut it anymore. And it's only going to push, it's going to push forward more collaborative relationships between shippers and carriers.
No, I agree with you, because too many times, and I see this tremendously, either from physically talking to customers, surveying them, or being on the road, anecdotally, they don't have the information, so they are relying on the carrier to be the arbiter and source of truth of all the data that they have picked up from them. And to your point, they do a darn good job. I know carriers that won't miss a single stick of freight from dimensionalizing it and weighing it. Some will miss some based on how prevalent dimensioners are, from break bulks to like regular terminals. But they're doing it, right?
Yeah.
And so many times, if the shipper is relying on the carrier to be the arbiter of data and the sole source of truth, you have no ground to stand on or nor backup information to really validate, and to your point, become more collaborative with the carrier and call certain things out. Now, I'm not saying you can't trust the carrier and the data they have is inaccurate or anything like that. Believe me, they're doing their job and they're doing it to a high degree of accuracy, and there's a reason for that.
Yeah.
But if you don't start adopting this, then all as you've done, and we know this, is the LTL carrier has now incurred more costs, right? Because of things that you haven't invested in. And now if they've incurred more costs, the price you pay has to go up.
Yeah.
So this ties into where I think the entire industry is missing the boat right now. And I don't think it'll be very long before this gets figured out, is there is no formal go-to-market strategy with a carrot to incent shipper behavior the way you want. You to your point, I've been telling them I want DIMS for a year. I want good information. I have never told them how they're going to benefit by giving me said information and what I'm going to do for them if they do that.
Right.
If the industry can figure that piece of the puzzle out, great. Now we're collaborating and both people are running in the same direction. And you're going to get more shippers adopting that because they're going to see the benefit, right? And you're going to get that stuff. And I think the more digital engagement you do, the more the industry can start to pivot and change and offer things like we as consumers get all the time. Like Verizon, if I auto pay my bill and pay it digitally every month, I get a discount because they don't want to send me paper and they don't want the administrative costs of running me down. So through platforms like MyCarrier, I envision a quote to cash journey of automation where hopefully the carriers can see the wins they're getting, but then incentivize, or maybe through the rate call, pass like a discount, right? Because of the efficiencies they're getting from this. I still think that's missing in my humble opinion, and the industry's yet to kind of figure that out between 3PL, direct shipper, and the carrier themselves.
Absolutely. Yeah, we are so early in future digitization, this API mainstream adoption and usage. Like, we're still at just basic functionality level and just getting everyone kind of building the density that the carriers need, to then take it to the next level with things like that. And you're right, there's never been carriers, in my opinion, like they hang out in the middle again, where it's like they'll tell you what they want and what would reduce their costs. Yes. But there's no real punishment or consequences. Like, they're still picking up, everybody's freight as often as they can, whether it's a eBOL involved and dimensions on the shipment, or whether it's a bill of lading scribbled out on a napkin. They're still picking up the freight. And then on the other side of that spectrum, they might talk to, hey, do this, it helps us, but there's real no quantification of, if you do this, this is what it's going to mean for your price and your service at the end of the day. And similar to your Verizon example, I love kind of what the insurance industry, I hate insurance, but I love what the insurance industry does. Like, if you think about all the things that are risk, they drive risk and cost for an insurance company that you have to fill out for your questionnaire, or your form when you're applying for new car insurance, the miles driven per day, the address of where the car sits, like all these different things that obviously they do drive the algorithm. But I've done that many times over the years, and I haven't seen too much difference in price from a lot of those things. It's, hey, will you allow us to monitor your driving and make sure you're a safe driver? Will you pay us, like you said, bank drafts or automated digital payments? It's that kind of upfront, like at the crux of the, provider and customer intersection. That's the stuff that, if you streamline it and you commit to being a better customer, and they don't have to come find you and knock on your door to get paid, then that means real and quantified savings.
Yep. And like when I step back and look at a holistic approach, what I love about this NMFTA change and moving more stuff to that sub 13 true density scale is on one end of it, you're kind of equalizing the revenue for the space, time, and risk formula you have. It's getting closer, right?
Yeah.
And on the other end of that, you're somewhat forcing behavior changes on that customer to get better information, which then dovetails into e-bill of lading, which is another topic that we were going to cover. Is in order for e-bill lading to work, make no mistake about it, one of the most important things out there is the commodity information.
Right.
And we have now rolled e-bill lading out with several carriers. I'm going to roll it out with several more. And you learn stuff each time you do this. And with e-bill of lading, under the hood, there's lots of validations. As a platform, we have our own validations, right, to check the data before transmitting and quarterbacking that to the carrier, of which they're going to have their own validations, right? So it could pass mine, but still hit a validation on their end. I'll give you an example. Let's say that you put in an MMFC number and I have sub rendered and you have 00 for sub. And I pass that to a carrier. They might fail the e-bill lading validation because the 00 is not a correlated sub like sub 1, 2, or 3. So It recognizes it as a null value, in which case the shipper either needs to remove that sub and ship with just the NMFC or put in the proper subclass so that the e-bill of lading hits and you pull the proper internet pre-pro, right? Yeah. So there's lots of nuances to this, not to mention now you go into another nuance, which is edits post-dispatch. So I could dispatch something and a lot of shippers get an add to the order. I've been a shipper. Some customer service gal runs out. You didn't ship this yet. They want to add this to it so they get their free freight. All of a sudden, I've now got to edit a shipment and redispatch it. And how carriers handle edits and upserts is different across the board as well. Right. So like, to me, I definitely see as a holistic approach, you're forcing the shipper to go down. And what's funny is do things that they would normally do in parcel. Like they have to have DIMS and complete information up front. Oh, they pay the bill before the carrier even gets there in most cases, right? Right. And then you shift over to LTL, very similar mode, spoken hub model, palletized freight, not parcel. And it's like, whoa, I have to do this now? Where am I going to get these from, right? It's just funny, the tale of two cities in that world where LTL is trying to get more down that digital path, like parcel's already gone down, but they had the benefit of just having two players in town and not 80 different common carrier to conform.
Yeah, not only that, but also just a tighter machine, I would say, like less exceptions, like everything is accounted for. There's still a lot of moving parts because it's still a networked business with physical locations and facilities on the provider side. And, you want to talk about pricing structures and rules tariffs. I mean, it's just as complex or more on the parcel side, but it's a system that hums along and it works. And even when it comes to, getting exceptions addressed and maybe getting credits back, like that's a proven, verified system. It's less of a black hole as what it seems to be on the LTL side. We're still in a place where LTL claims, LTL disputes, it's still a bit of a black hole. And carriers, I think, that's just something to keep in mind. Like as we get more automated and more digitally connected and collaborative between carriers and 3PLs and shippers on the front end with account setup and rating and quoting and tracking, that those back end things and anything exceptions or claims related has to keep up. Otherwise you're going to have this uneven balance. So, but I agree. And this was a huge, eBOLs being one, and then just kind of like the parcelization of LTL. I feel like we're both pretty big buzzy topics, like a year to 3 years ago. And they've kind of both been drowned out just by the recent, focus and initiative on the classification changes, but still very real issues. And LTL needs to be treated less like truckload is and more like parcel is, in my opinion.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I also think too, like the first end of e-bill lading for me, just the pure start of it is the true connectivity, pulling an internet pre-pro, and that pre-pro right? Stops you from having to hand out pro books. It stops you from weird billing things or terminal specific pros based on billing types, third party versus outbound prepaid. What pro do I pull, right? A lot of systems would have to archetype and build all these different modulus and algorithms to handle all this. When you move to e-billating, it's so much cleaner because the billing type will pull the internet pre-pro, terminal specific with the prefix, right? Like you know what you're getting in a lot of cases with this. And then that pre-pro shows as a pending pickup because tracking's initialized. The driver shows up, which is one of your most valuable assets, probably 150 to 170 bucks an hour all in with equipment and everything else for costs. I don't want him sitting there hand typing into his little Game Boy, right? All the other information. And I don't want him putting stickers on things. I would rather have that come right from my internet, my driver show up, scan, information's complete, and go and get out of there.
Yeah, that just makes me think of, a lot of industries, and just even thinking in the transportation world, truckload and LTL both have their own matching problems. On the truckload side, it's a level or two up. It's like, hey, I need to find, procure the right carrier to put under this load, and that's the majority of like the matching problems in truckload. In LTL, where everyone's terminal is, you know how to find them, you know where their website is, you tender a pickup, and 9 or maybe 8 times out of 10 they're going to be there. It's you're not, there's no matching with the company or the provider, but the carriers have, just going off of that general kind of old school paper bill of lading that they're picking up. It's a binary, they're like, yes, there was a document that I was able to pick up, sign, take with me, and then we'll sort the rest out later. We'll make sure that we figure out how to bill it to the right account at the right pricing. And all of this eBOL and increased digitization of LTL is what eliminates those additional kind of granular or like account level matching problems. And again, what does that do? It reduces cost for the carrier. Like and this is aside from, this is actually, I'm passionate about this because a lot of people think with the name of our business, RateHero, we're solely focused on getting shippers and 3PLs better rates, like upfront freight rates. We're looking a lot more holistically at the entire cost of the LTL transaction from all sides. And that's a whole other, that's a whole other rate. When you layer in all these manual and paper driven, and it's digital for me, I'm going to print it out of a, inkjet printer, give it to you. You have to deal with digitizing it. All that does is add more layers of time and cost into the LTL life cycle.
Yep.
And everybody involved, whether they're carriers, shippers, brokers, technology companies, service providers, should all be, infinitely focused on just taking cost out of the LTL life cycle.
Absolutely. And speaking of that, and I think I don't know if it was somebody produced a good article on this, where they were saying because of these NMFTA changes and the pricing discipline you've seen maintained, is Q3 of this year won't be the highest margin or money the LTL industry made, but the highest like benchmark rates that you see, right, for shipping in this space than you've seen in a long, long time. Because like when I've analyzed it, I think you'll get anywhere, depending on carrier, it's probably somewhere between like an 8 to 14% increase in revenue on the exact same freight. And that's with taking some of your losers in that might class down a little bit, which isn't a lot, but most will kind of class up, especially in that spot between about 100 and 250. I've seen more slide in the northern direction.
Yeah, I can only think of alcohol being one of the few exceptions where previously I believe it was class 110. Now, if it's density rated, it's going to be much lower, unless those alcohol manufacturers start filling the bottle less every single time. But yeah, you're right. It's on the front end. It's generally going to, switching from, hey, this commodity is this item at this class, no matter the packaging, no matter the density or any other variable, to throw it into that 13 subscale, there is generally going to be an uptick. But speak more to what you were saying. So most people would hear that and just say, okay, that means to me that carrier, revenue and probably profitability will rise with that. So how does that filter down, to there's no promises in Q3, Q4 earnings calls that every carrier is going to be coming to the table with a 5 point better OR.
No, no. And that's why I say like the overall price might pick up a little bit. And this is where we got to see where the dust settles, right? Are you going to really impact administrative costs in areas like your traffic department and your sales reps time through resolution of variances and disputes? And then you deal with that. Does your DSO, your day sales outstanding, creep up because now things aren't getting paid as fast? So while there was an increase in revenue after the dust settles, how do those increased costs to operate that same business impact the margin on it, right? Even though the price is a little higher and at face value, it feels like it's going to be more. Are you sinking in more costs as you go through the bell curve of this change until it levels out?
Yeah, that makes sense. And if you took any national LTL carrier, all the real estate, facilities, trucks, trailers, assets, and you asked what's your highest single cost line item, it would be their people. It would be the
Oh, yeah.
driver, the dock workers, back office. And a lot of people don't realize that. So if they're beefing up back office departments, not only W&I departments to catch some of these things, but also just the freight rate analysts and
Mhm.
collections and just coordinators when it comes to like keeping, big national account and 3PL account relationships smooth. That's going to be a huge increased cost for carriers just to really kind of self-regulate where,
Yeah.
hey, classification changed. That same shipment we picked up last week might now cost 10% more. But one, we know you're going to come knocking on our pricing team's door to see what can be done to level this out.
Mhm.
And two, while all of that's being figured out and the dust is still kind of swirling, we don't miss a beat. We're not going to stop picking up, delivering your freight, dealing with invoice issues, and they've got to be ready and prepared to keep that experience
Yep.
smooth.
Yeah, it's going to be interesting to see how everything works out. And by the time the dust settles, they'll be picking up and starting to look at the next swath of items that goes through and announcing that. And then the chaos will continue to ensue. But I'm a big believer that it's all the right chaos to level set the industry and move us in a better direction to not only digitize, but offer the customers a carrot as you start understanding, you know what I mean, how to go to market with this, how to digitize more shippers. And also, like, I know we're hot and heavy with these changes. Like, one of the things that have really helped us is just AI. And I know it can be a buzzword around here, and every platform you visit, AI is in your face. You're on Microsoft, there's Copilot now. You see it everywhere, right? Between announcements and like the Trump administration doubling down on AI and AI infrastructure and the power it's going to take. Like, AI for us has just helped us really translate the LTL industry because there's so much translation that has to occur, and then taking that translated information and making it human digestible, right?
Yep.
From it could be validating an address for an accessorial. It could be reading an invoice to tell them exactly why it was wrong in a way that they will understand. Claim deficit weight and rate-based changes and things like that that occur when shipments are W&R'd and they do apply new formulations, or you hit a cube max and you fall outside of that pricing window. Using AI to read rules tariffs. And really, as the customer goes through that workflow, to basically stop them from doing dumb things at scale that they otherwise wouldn't have been aware of, right?
Yep.
And as you go through that, you clean the information up, you produce a better experience, and you're also teaching the user through a guided workflow about LTL a little bit. And I think when you attack it from several angles, you can put forth the best product that will render the best output for both the shipper and the carrier if done right. And technology is not a silver bullet. It takes collaboration of people, the assets, and the technology, and you got to continue to innovate and iterate. But I see that it's setting the stage, and the LTL industry is finally at the starting line for that.
Yeah. Yeah, it's exciting. And the two best areas I think, to utilize AI right now are translation and matching, which we've
Yes.
talked about a million times over. Conversations and articles about AI driving the trucks or loading the trailers or making full scale, account level customer pricing decisions. We're probably a long way off. but just inserting it where it makes sense, to stitch together the classification system, the rules tariffs that are different for every single carrier and changing every month, if not more rapidly. All of these things, not only as you mentioned, to make it more human digestible, but to make it more machine and technology digestible as well.
Yeah.
Because you have these standalone silos of your average TMS, they're relying on carrier and third party product connectivity, as well as whatever, foundational kind of industry IP that they can build within. But this is a complex, lot of moving parts industry and a lot of variables at play. And if you don't have this like translation layer, I mean, that's where humans alone
Yeah.
can't keep up, especially in LTL. It's still a weird, nuanced industry, and it makes a lot more sense. It's cheaper and quicker to build on top of kind of the old school, like I compare it to the IRS tax code, right? Like TurboTax didn't go change the tax code. They built on top of it and made it more of a easier to understand, better customer experience. And
Mm-hmm.
that's where, companies like yours and mine can really push the industry forward to kind of translate, simplify, and, dish things up so the right human is still making the right decision, but they
Yep.
don't have to dig into a first principles level and read through every carrier's entire rules tariff in order to get to that.
I'm with you because I use the AI a lot and it figures things out because I always prompt it to explain things to me like I'm 10. And now it's just kind of a snarky butthead. And it's like, oh, let me explain this to you like you're 10.
Right. Yeah, I was going to say you sound like my grandpa there. I use the
Yeah.
AI, the Google.
Even the googly.
Right. No, I'm
Yeah.
with you. I don't know if I ever told you though, with that Tariff Hero, the AI, model we trained on rules tariffs, we released a snarky, grumpy, like uncle version as well called Tariff
There
Villain.
you go.
It gives you a lot of the same information, but it just makes you feel like an idiot for asking.
I love it, Curtis. Well, it was good rapping. I've got a jam downstairs. We got a town hall that's kicking off. So let's
Nice.
do another one of these here in a couple weeks. It was good to catch up with you. I know we've been super busy with all this industry change going on and have had full plates, but let's make sure we don't miss each other here at the dinner table and sit down for another conversation.
I agree. Good to have a summer check-in with you. And yeah, until the next time. See ya.
All right, my man. I'll catch up with you.
All right.